working session. I request Sri R.K.P. Shankardass, Vice President of the Bar Association of India and former President of International Bar Association, Ms. Pinky Anand, Senior Advocate, Additional Solicitor General of India, please come to the dais, please. Sri P.H. Parikh, Senior Advocate and President of Supreme Court Bar Association, please come to the dais. Mr. Prashant Kumar, our own Secretary General of Bar Association of India and President-Elect. I now request Sri Prashant Kumar to give brief introduction for the first working session on the topic.
Friends, we start the first working session of the convention on a topic which requires a little introduction and some background information. Before starting that, I regret to inform you that both Mr. K K Venugopal and Mr. Lalit Bhasin are down with viral fever, and more than that, a terrible throat infection. Because of that, they are unable to speak. We have requested an equally eminent person and maybe equally pertinent person for the session topic, Mr. R.K.P. Shankardass, who is not only our senior most vice president, but has been the leader of the global bar for being the first Asian to be the president of International Bar Association. It is befitting that we have him to chair the session which is on establishment of BRICS legal forum and leadership in other international legal associations, role of Indian legal profession in promoting the rule of law and a more just and equitable world trade and economic order. Friends, as we all know that our legal system follows the Anglo-Saxon traditions of common law derived from the United Kingdom. Most of the concepts of the rule of law, equality, good conscience, and other such legal concepts are rooted in the Western tradition which have been adopted by us. But that does not mean that countries like India, which are one of the oldest civilizations, did not have the kernel for fruition of its own culture rooted in the rule of law, human values, and constructing a system of governance rooted in the value of dharma, which in law, because dharma is also equivalent to law, which means just action. So we go beyond a static conceptualization of law, we make it dynamic, we make it action-oriented in our own tradition and culture. Not only that, as I have been participating in numerous international organizations, what I have come to realize and what many people I have interacted with who do not belong to Europe or Americas have come to realize as well is that though we have no quarrel with Western conceptualizations. We have no fundamental difference in the basic concepts of human dignity, human rights, democracy as we perceive. But at the same time, in Asia and in other continents, the civilizations and civilizational culture and the rule of law has developed in its own unique ways, rooted in the soil, culture and civilization. And it is here that sometimes we find that the dominant discourse which governs the dialogue, the terms of the dialogue, is focused on the stage of development, the experiential philosophy and values rooted in Europe and America, which may or may not have an exact fit with the way we have developed and other countries in different continents have developed in their own unique ways. In UK, they had centuries ago evolved a system in which the absolute powers of the king were supplanted by the powers of the parliament, which represented the will of the people. And the absolute power of the king, which also, in case of England, had power of a religion because of the Church of England, which was also headed by the king, turned into a monarchy. In other countries, and especially when we talk of Asia, our immediate neighborhood also, that historical process has taken its own organic way. And though in UK today the monarchy is more the stuff of tabloid news and other inane concerns about their lifestyles, the countries in Asia, like Japan, have a very reverential attitude towards their monarchy. The same way, though one of the neighboring countries where we are having a Law Asia conference, Thailand, is going through a sort of crisis where the democracy has repeatedly failed to function, the biggest disadvantage they are facing today, being governed under the military rule, is that their king, who are at the center of wielding moral authority and commanding the respect unparalleled in any Western countries, has grown too old to have any effective control. Otherwise, most of the crises which a democratic polity could not resolve were resolved by the single, impartial, commanding voice of the king. So, whereas the Western conceptualizations have grown in distance, in their organic growth, in India and in other neighboring countries, we still are struggling democracies, trying to find way how to balance the will of majority with the rights of minority. For that, we have given ourselves written documents in the form of organic law, the Constitution. But in the life of nations, 50 years, 100 years are just blink of an eye. When we confront these things, we are overwhelmed with them. But when in the long time histories are written, the decades are compressed into a few pages. And the other concern is that somehow we found that the multilateral institutions, even the United Nations, their conception of the rule of law was overwhelmingly rooted in the idea, and they marketed not that, the general populations and, people who are living in poverty, in deprivation should benefit. If you look at the World Bank and even United Nations, we find that the rule of law conceptualizations in last 3-4 decades were very heavily tilted in trying to push systems which say, if you don't have the rule of law, by the rule of law, they primarily meant protection of property rights, certainty of laws for big corporations to come and do business, to make investments, then that country will suffer because of the lack of rule of law. So their conceptualization of rule of law has been very, very and fundamentally economic oriented, and they tried to push the manifestations of rule of law which advanced their own economic and trade interests. We don't have even quarrel with that. Yes, every country for its own benefit has the rule of law, the certainty of laws, independent judiciary. But as in the recent decades, the balance of economic power has slowly started shifting as the manufacturing bases have started shifting. The rule of law and related instruments have become the only tool by which those who have lost the manufacturing capacities, those whose economic generation powers are receding, are banking upon to keep up their flagrant lifestyles at the expense of the other populations of the world. And that is where, friends, we thought to work towards the formulation of BRICS Legal Forum, comprising of countries ranging from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and lastly South Africa, which joined in 2011, who together represent half of the global population and are accounting for most of the economic activity taking place because we have cheaper labor, we have abundance of natural resources, to come together in the quest of creating a more democratic and equitable world trade and economic order. And while pursuing this goal, we also have to see that the legal system and the law develops, and we develop inherent capacities to address the areas which are vital to us, which may be vital, as vital to the bigger players in the world economy. That is our concern to make available drinking water, one of the biggest challenges facing the global community. To have enough food to feed all our populations. To push the world trade and patent regime in a way that our populations can get cheap medicines. To push the regimes, global regimes, in a way that our farmers can cultivate the local varieties suited for local consumption and have seed sovereignty, a subject which is very close to the heart of Pinky Anand. These are the concerns which somehow get lost in the dominant discourse driven by the Western and other advanced economies. So with this background, I will request our chairperson to conduct the session. I'm sorry if I have taken a little longer, but I thought a background is necessary. Thank you.
the distinguished colleagues in the panel, members of the Bar Association, delegates, and our distinguished guests. Let me start by saying, I hope everybody knows I am not Venugopal. I also am sorry that he's not here, because he was one of the leaders, or one of the original thinkers, who, in the course of a number of visits to China, began to develop this idea of this group of BRICS, Lawyers Forum. And I wish he had been here, because he, as I say, has developed it and encouraged it from time to time. I have been a little bit out of this development, because my main interest basically has been in international law, public international law in the recent years. So I haven't really had enough time, enough involvement to know very much about it, which is one reason why I'm most grateful to our General Secretary, Mr. Prashant Mr. Prashant Kumar, to, this is a risk you have all the time. I'm most obliged to him and grateful to him that he has explained to you what the concept stands for. My own orientation basically has been also, of course, in seeking cooperation from world bodies of lawyers, or rather even national bodies of lawyers who were involved or are involved even now, increasingly so, in the International Bar Association, which, as you know, probably is a organization which today represents over 2 million lawyers, and it has been built up since 1947. So it was more sort of individual based and related to bar associations rather than an organization with the cooperation of national states and their organized associations. And that's why I will not venture into the concept itself. The one thing I can say, it certainly seems to me from a distance or in objective terms to be a very good idea, and I suspect I will get a little more involved with it. But we are short of time, and therefore I'm going to proceed straight away to the panelists presenting their points of view and explaining to you what we are discussing, and in particular in relation to how the rule of law is being, in a sense, the discussions on it, the dialogues on it are being internationalized, and these 5 countries do have a common factor in economic terms, which is basically relief of poverty in each of their cases, and people who are as I say, left out of the economy. But I assume that the Lawyers Forum will facilitate in times to come discussions between lawyers from these 5 countries to guide whether it's investment, whether it's other kinds of ideas, and how to make it, just as it is that we find today lawyers are needed to help foreign investment in our country. But this will be an exchange between them and facilitate this kind of economic development in every area, not necessarily just investment. Now, without much ado, may I invite Mr. Parekh, P.H. Parekh, President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, who will address you now. Thank you.
Mr. R.K.P. Shankardass, Pinky Anand, Mr. Prashant, Lodhi, Mr. Anil Divan, Mr. Upul Jayasuriya, the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, my dear colleagues, law students, ladies and gentlemen. If I was asked to give my speech in one sentence, it will be, United we stand, and we stand for Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Well, there has been a lot of domination of America and European countries in the matter of international trade and even otherwise. I mean, sometimes you do feel that there is a white skin, there is a brown skin, there is a black skin. We all fall under brown skin. And at the international forum, you do find a little bit of discrimination. Unless they need you very badly, then of course they praise you, etc. This is the reality. And one of the reasons of this reality is the economic power. That white skin has the maximum economic resources of the world, and in the same order, the brown skin has less than that, and the black skin has in African countries and things like that. Now, this is a reality, and therefore, unless we stand united, various international organizations, including United Nations, UN bodies, whether IMF, is all slanted in favor of these countries. And since they control, in fact, at times people believe that there is America who is controlling the various United Nations organizations. Now, I'm not in a mood to criticize anyone. I'm in a need to say why we need to unite. Because we, these 5 countries, we constitute 40% of the human population on this earth. We constitute 20% of the world GDP and 18% of the world economy. At times it was believed that the number is bad, higher population is bad, therefore we people who have more population, we are at a disadvantage. It is possible for united group of this type of 40% of the world population to come together and convert a disadvantage of excessive population into an advantage for us and for our countries. Today, many of the foreigners love India because of our